Now welcome to another lightning response video, where this time we got a question from Grievous Reborn, who asked, "Hey Thor, did you see the recent article from Popverse about Timothy Zahn saying he's asked Disney multiple times about wanting to use Mara Jade, but they keep telling him no? Do you think Disney is saying no because they don't want their female character Rey to be shown up by a female character that Lucasfilm under them didn't create?" Popverse also had an article where Timothy's talking about what George Lucas's opinion on Thrawn and Mara Jade is. And first of all, I had not seen the article from Popverse, but I went and checked it out, and here is a quote from Timothy Zahn after he was asked at a convention what Legends character he'd like to see in the new canon, and he said, "The obvious one, Mara Jade. I keep nudging Lucasfilm asking them if I could write a book. The answers come back basically someplace between no and heck no." And the first thing I find rather interesting about his response, or Lucasfilm's response to him, is that they tell him heck no, which leads back to your question and makes you wonder why they apparently are so adamant about not using Mara Jade in the new canon, when she is very much a fan favorite character. She is one of the best and most beloved characters from the old expanded universe. Now, do I think it has anything to do with Rey? And maybe, possibly, though probably not. I mean, as we've talked about many times before, Lucasfilm and those like Kennedy at Lucasfilm, they do seem to like to go with this narrative that Rey was like the first ever super duper strong female character in the history of Star Wars, despite others literally being in the films like Leia and Padme. Though, of course, Rey was more of a physically strong female character, one who could wield a lightsaber and kick some butt in a fight and do all that. Not that Leia and Padme couldn't hold their own in combat and kick a little butt too. We certainly see it from both of them in the films, but again, they weren't out there with a lightsaber using the Force and taking down other lightsaber-wielding Force users or anything like that, at least not in the films, unless you count Leia taking down Luke in The Rise of Skywalker when he's training her in that flashback. Anyway, yes, Lucasfilm and many in the media like to claim that the reason fans rejected Rey had a lot to do with her simply being a strong female character that men don't want to see women kicking that much butt in Star Wars or something. So to begin using Mara Jade, putting a sort of spotlight on a female character that was kicking butt over 30 years ago, and again has been a beloved fan favorite all that time, it does poke some pretty big holes in their narrative. However, it's not like letting Zahn write a book about Mara Jade, or at least with her in it. It's not like that shines a huge spotlight on her. Yeah, plenty of people would read the book. I am going to read that book. It'd be, I'd imagine, a big deal in the Star Wars fandom, but it is not causing ripples out in the mainstream, and suddenly everybody isn't going to be talking about how big of a deal Mara Jade is. The casual fans really aren't going to be talking about it, or anyone beyond that. So I really don't think it has anything to do with anything like that, with being afraid of blowing up the narrative. Not to mention, I think Ahsoka does or really should blow that narrative up already anyway. The fact that she is a strong female character who, kicks up a lot of butt and no one really seems to have any issue with her at all, other than some fans thinking she should have died to Vader in Rebels or maybe kind of stayed dead. And going back even further, some took issue with her back in the early days of the Clone Wars because they didn't think Anakin should have a Padawan, or that it didn't make any sense with Revenge of the Sith because where is she, or what is she up to, why isn't she mentioned during that film? However, that's not even exactly what you asked. Rather, you asked if they don't want to bring back a female character from before their time because they don't want to sort of show up Rey. And I'm assuming you mean one not made in the Disney era, a strong female character that Kennedy and company are not responsible for. And, well, like I was just kind of talking about, they did use Ahsoka already. She even got her own show, obviously, and she is from the pre-Disney era. They've also pushed a character like Bo-Katan in arguably their flagship show, The Mandalorian, and she is from the pre-Disney days as well. And in both cases, those are very physically capable women, if you will. So I'm not sure that it's about helping Rey save face or anything like that. I don't know if that is the reason they're reluctant to use Mara Jade. Instead, I think, and maybe I am going to give them way too much credit here, but instead they probably realize it is a no-win scenario bringing Mara Jade into the new canon. Because you would kind of have two options with her. You could keep her as true to the EU version as possible, which obviously sees her get involved with Luke Skywalker, keeping it where they marry and have a child and all of that. But then what happens to them? Where are they? Where are Mara and their child during the sequels? Why did Luke abandon them too? It just makes Luke running off to die alone all that much worse. And yeah, you could go with the option that Ben, or should I say Kylo, I should really specify given Mara and Luke's son was Ben. But you could go with the option that Ben Solo, or Kylo Ren, some way, somehow murdered Mara and or their son. And that's a big part of what truly breaks Luke. That what he sees in his head that night, the one from The Last Jedi, what he sees in Kylo's head, is not just some growing generic darkness within him, but he sees that his nephew murdered his wife and his son, or is maybe more realistically just somehow responsible for their death. And I mean, Luke does get pretty broken in the EU when his nephew murders Mara, so there is a sort of precedence to do something like that. However, I think Mara deserves better, nor do I think a lot of fans would be too fond of the idea of Mara being brought into the new canon just to, or mainly to, explain disgruntled Luke in the sequels. When it was done in the EU, when Mara was killed, it was a natural part of an ever-evolving story, you could say. While here it would be used to kind of try to go back and fix a problem they created with Luke in the sequels. Plus fans would see it as just that, as trying to sort of justify and fix the sequel trilogy that they don't like. And I'm sure a lot of fans just don't want to see Mara being any part of any of this, even if, again, there is some precedence from the EU doing something like this. Either way, I think a lot of fans would rather just never see Mara in the new canon than be used in this way. Heck, I've even done videos where I suggested this very possibility, put a theory out there for all of this. Not that others haven't had the same idea. And it just, it never goes over very well. It is never very warmly met. A lot of people just flat out hate the idea of, again, using Mara to explain the way Luke was in the sequels, that she should have to die to save those films, is not something a lot of fans appreciate. The other option they'd have if they brought her back is to, sure, keep her backstory more or less the same, make her the Emperor's hand again and all that, but never have her become involved with Luke and change who she ultimately does become, because Luke is, of course, a big part of who she does become in the EU. But if they would do anything like that, it would be Mara Jade in name alone. You can't have Mara Jade and Luke not together and still be anything like the Mara Jade we got. And if they would do anything like bring her back and not have her connected to Luke, well then you really should just make a new character instead of using her. I think if given the option, most fans would rather have Mara Jade never come back to the new canon than have a version of her that is rather different than the one we got in the EU. Again, it just wouldn't even be the same character, so why use that name? So yeah, I think Lucasfilm perhaps realizes it is just a no-win scenario if they bring her back. Though I gotta admit, I am rather curious what Zahn would do with the character if he did bring her back or bring her into the new canon. Would he want to put her with Luke somehow, do a similar yet perhaps slightly different story than the EU version? Maybe you don't kill her off to explain disgruntled Luke. Maybe when that fateful night with Ben happens, he leaves her too. Which, yeah, I think would make some EU fans hate the sequels even more, knowing they were responsible for breaking those two apart. So yeah, that's probably a really bad idea. Nevertheless, I am again curious to know what Zahn would do with her, especially since it seems like he keeps asking and therefore probably has some sort of plan for her. And I am curious, even though whatever new path he chose for her in the new canon would likely be disappointing through no fault of his own, because we simply can't get a version of her that would be anything like the one we got in the EU. Not without embracing the idea of, again, probably having her be killed by Kylo. But either way, by the sound of it, by what Zahn has said that Lucasfilm keeps telling him heck no, for better or worse, it doesn't sound like we'll be getting Mara Jade in the new canon anytime soon, if ever. Well, that's all I got for you this time. Now it's your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think. Would you like to see Mara Jade in the new canon or not? And if so, how do you think she should be used? Whatever the case may be, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.